light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I'm Sister Who. There are a lot of times where I go through something difficult, and well, every day for me is difficult as an autistic because everything is a sequence of so many intense details. I remember mentioning in an email to someone the other day that I think I measure time differently because I remember moments and hours more than weeks and months. So that what may be only 1 week for one person, to me has been 7 days, or however many minutes that is, however many hours that is. There's a wonderful song in musical Rent, I think, where it starts out 525,600 minutes, because that's the number of minutes in a year, 525,600 minutes. What if people, or myself, for example, if I was perceiving 525,600 minutes in a year, instead of just saying that was last year or that was 1 year, to have say, no, I remember experiencing 525,600 minutes. And that's why time to me seems so dense and so jammed and so many things going on. And there are a lot of times where I'm going through something difficult and I'm trying to persevere, and sometimes even making these productions is incredibly difficult. There's a lot more work that goes into making this show than probably most people ever imagine. And in that, to say that, well, if I knew why this was so important, then it wouldn't be so much of a struggle, because I could constantly be thinking of the reason, and that would justify whatever struggle was going on. And I would know that the reason I'm putting up with this is because of X, Y, Z, whatever the explanation is. But most of the time I don't know. And I have no idea who's watching the show or where they're going to be at experientially when they see the show. Something tragic may have just happened to them, something that makes them gravitate to particular words I say in a particular way, that it was just what they needed to hear at that moment. I have no way of knowing that. I trust that to the divine, to the serendipity of life, or whatever you want to call it. And I welcome the honor of being helpful to someone in the moment that they need help, in the way that they need help, even when I don't know that that's what they need or that that's when they'll be watching. There was one time when I had first started being Sister Who that I was lining up for a parade one year, and this man came up to me and said he wanted to really thank me for what I said on the show, because the previous winter he had been going through a really dark time, and when he saw Sister Who on television and heard something that I said in that particular episode, that it somehow made a difference, and he was able to turn his life around and go on living, and things had gradually gotten better ever since. And I just said, thank you, I am honored that I could be part of your healing process. But I really didn't know what he'd been watching at the time, because at that particular time the show was in reruns and I had no idea what episode they were playing, because there are times of what I call active production and times when the show continues to be played. The first period of active production when the show began lasted, just barely over 2 years, because it was November of 1992 to December of 1994. And at the time we finished, they said I was a year ahead of schedule, because I had been so organized and so meticulous about the details, and so efficient in generating shows in such an unbelievably short amount of time. I think I set some records that may never be broken, I'm not sure. But then recently that record was broken by myself going into the studio and exceeding the record, so that I've now done 6 half-hour shows in that amount of time, and I was told that probably that record will never be broken. And I don't care, that's not the point. The point was to make the shows to trust intuition, to be present and say whatever came to mind, because I found that in the beginning when I tried to pre-script shows, people kind of liked them and they were okay. But then when I began doing shows that were unscripted and words and ideas and images just started coming through, and I just decided not to censor what I said and let it go, that somehow the divine understood why that needed to be shared at this moment in time and who would be watching, who would need to hear that. And the more I trusted that, the more I got responses from viewers literally around the world saying that this had made such a difference in their lives. And someone who was dealing with ongoing depression for the longest time, and then through watching my show was able to move to a point of healing. And I'm honored to be part of their healing process. I'm eager to serve the work in whatever ways I can. But I tend to be my own worst critic in terms of when I say things that are awkward or sound awkward, or when I use and too many times. And on a side note, I've sometimes told people that is probably the most profound word in the English language, because it's never spoken unless the person is thinking at that very moment. But in any case, I found that as I trusted the work and trusted whatever I said to be the right thing, and that even that when I wasn't afraid of my vulnerability and I wasn't trying to appear perfect, but I was being absolutely real and absolutely honest, that those were the times when people would respond that that's exactly what I needed. And for a time there, I could still do it, but I haven't been asked to in so long. But for a time there, I was also doing tarot readings for people, or tarot. I don't know if there's any agreement on whether it's pronounced tarot or tarot, but certain conservative elements of Christianity regard the tarot with an enormous amount of suspicion. To me, it's a collection of glorified Rorschach ink blots, if you're familiar with what Rorschach ink blots are. It's essentially an image, and essentially you see whatever you need to see in it, depending on where you are at that point. And they're images that could be interpreted so many different ways. And so when I would do tarot readings for people, I specifically would not ask them any questions, and I encouraged them not to volunteer any information. I would touch their hands and they'd touch mine, and we would trust that somehow there was some sort of personal energy that would travel back and forth. And then I would shuffle the deck, deal the cards, and say whatever came to mind about what was on the cards. Just whatever came to mind, speaking off the top of my head, trusting intuition. And the people for whom I did tarot readings were absolutely amazed at how on target I was. But in relating that, to me, it's always been about personal growth. It has not been a matter of trying to predict the future, which in that sense, it's really kind of a fool's errand to try to predict the future, because the future is by nature unformed and can be affected by every choice that's made. And I can only tell you what is a possible or probable future based on the way circumstances are in this moment. But the minute the reading is finished and you may make another choice, or somebody else may make another choice, somebody may veer into your path who wasn't going to be there otherwise, any number of things can happen. There's so many variables. And all of that could change the outcome, and so any prediction I could make won't necessarily happen. But that's why I try to focus on it being a matter of personal growth rather than some sort of way of predicting anything. And so in meeting with a person and speaking with them and using this tool, I would specifically try to present things that would tell them areas where they could consider growing, things that they can consider that maybe they hadn't before, or maybe they never looked at it in that way before. There was one particular card in the tarot deck. The one I was using was the Aquarian Tarot, and it was the Ten of Swords. And in one and only one reading it ever happened, where when I looked at the card, the image that flashed into my mind was acupuncture treatment. Frequently, the card is interpreted very badly because it's a man laying on the ground with 10 swords thrust in his back, and which could be interpreted as some kind of major loss. But with whoever was sitting across from me in that moment, the words that flashed in my mind were acupuncture treatment, that this is something where there are various potentially painful experiences, that they were somehow modifying the energy flows within his body or his life in a way that would ultimately prove to be healing rather than damaging. I don't know a lot about acupuncture, but I've heard some people say that it has been one of the most miraculous things they ever did. I don't respond well to it because my body has an aversion to needles that is much more extreme than what other people experience. But for those who are able to use acupuncture, they might be surprised at the results. In a similar sort of way, I guess, I don't know the explanation, and I guess that it's kind of going back to the topic of this show, that would knowing why it happens make a difference? And in some cases, no, it wouldn't. And in some cases, it would be easier for me to go through, but I might not make the same choices or push myself as hard or make as much effort. If I knew why it was happening and if I knew that was the reason, then maybe I wouldn't do it the way I would have otherwise, because there may be additional effects that will come from me doing it the way I did when I didn't know. And so that's where I try to trust that there's a divine perspective from which this would all make sense. And that maybe it's happening the way it is because God knows all the other effects of my way of responding. But it's putting myself in those situations and trusting something beyond myself to guide me, my words, my thoughts, whatever it is I bring to that moment. And yet within myself to make it the most positive that I can possibly make it. That's my contribution, that I want to push it in specifically a positive direction rather than being lazy and allow it to fall in some negative way. The belief in fate and destiny seems to be pretty much one that goes around the world and transcends religions and so forth, and has been interpreted in so many different ways in so many different countries. Many, many years ago, I was reading Walk Across China. I stumbled across a book by Peter Jenkins called A Walk Across America, and then he followed it with a book called A Walk West, during which he describes the people he met, the experiences he had, and this fascinating journey as he's going from New England to New Orleans, I think it was, and then from New Orleans to the state of Washington, walking across the United States and commenting on what he saw, what he observed, the people he met along the way, and how much he learned from that. And from reading those two books, then he did A Walk Across China. And so I read that one too. Fascinating books about this individual perception of people and the world and situations, and he ran into some categories, but his experience was very individual. And I don't know if anyone who traced his steps would have the same experience. But he mentions when he was doing A Walk Across China that there was a peculiar, in his estimation and mine, belief in fate, that this idea that souls were fated to have the life and the experiences and the death that they did. And so he witnessed several times where a small child might fall into a river and begin drowning, and everybody in the family would stand on the shore and watch and not do anything because they wouldn't want to interfere with the possibility that it was that child's fate to die by drowning. And they don't want to mess up God's plan for that child. And I don't know that I could be that restrained in that situation, because I would interpret the situation instead as saying, maybe the reason you're there is because you have the ability to intervene. And if that child was fated to die by drowning, you wouldn't be there and you wouldn't be available to save them. And so that's where, and when people encounter challenges in our communities and in our societies, maybe the reason you're noticing it is because you're the one with the ability to respond. And I'm sure there are people who could do more eloquent television shows than I do, and who could do all sorts of ministerial things better than I could. But the fact that I'm the one there with the opportunity suggests to me that I'm the one who's supposed to do it. Even if I don't think I'm the best person for the job, I'm the one who's supposed to do it. Which, going back to a reference I read in the Christian Bible many years ago, I think in my teenage years, there's this long couple chapters that are dealing with, at the beginning of the book of Jeremiah, the book being all the writings attributed to the prophet Jeremiah. And it starts out with God calling Jeremiah to be a prophet. And I don't know if it was in his mind, in his heart, or if it was audible sound in the room or what, but it was God visiting Jeremiah and calling him to be a prophet. And at first Jeremiah is protesting that I'm not the best one for the job. I don't have the right words. I'm not whatever. I'm not. And God is like, I think that it is that the angel takes a coal of fire from the altar, touches it to his lips and says, your speech impediment or your difficulty has been healed. You can now be God's mouthpiece to the people of around him in his community. And after Jeremiah says, okay, I'll be your prophet, the next thing God says is, oh, by the way, they're not going to listen to you. If it were me, I would say, this doesn't exactly support any notion of divine wisdom. First, you want Jeremiah to be the prophet, then you're going to tell him, oh, by the way, they're not going to listen to you anyway. Why would God call him to do something that was doomed to failure? And yet, was it doomed to failure, or was Jeremiah writing for a generation that had not yet been born? It's these sorts of things where we come back to saying, if I knew the reason why, would it make a difference? And in some ways it would, in some ways it wouldn't. And if Joan of Arc knew she was going to be burned at the stake, would she have responded to God's call to be the military ministerial person that she was? And yet somehow something told her that that was what she needed to do. And the fact that she was burned at the stake didn't change the fact that that was what she needed to do as an act of divine service. And so as Sister Hu, there are times where I exceed all expectations. I do what everyone says can't be done, and I make a difference in someone's life, and it's all wonderful. And the response I get, instead of more opportunities, is having more opportunities denied, and more in ways that I'm marginalized more, and I'm silenced more, and I'm pushed aside more by incredibly intelligent, well-educated people. But again and again, I'm not normal enough, and I'm not what they had in mind. And with all of that, I have to still say, but maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe I'm creating this work for a generation that has not yet been born. And maybe that's where the difference will be made. And if that's where the difference will be made, I better be faithful in doing it. And I've sometimes said, I'd rather be punished for what I am than rewarded for what I'm not. And I have been punished for what I am and not rewarded. And, and in some senses, people wanting to reward me for what I'm not, but I refused to do it. And so I didn't get that reward. And with all of that, when I look in the mirror and I know that I've lived with integrity and I've done what my creative inspiration and my spiritual inspiration have called me to do, I don't have any regrets. Even whether I'm punished or whether I'm rewarded, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I am me and I do what I was born to do. Thank you very much for watching. And now may you be blessed with love and peace in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. Amen. This mountain trail is steep and rocky. The air is thin and cold. I'm ascending its winding, graveled pathway to make peace with my soul. The world below now seems so small, and the heavens close enough to touch. And where the two meet is where I now stand, still loving you so much. Your fingerprints are all around me as we play hide and seek. Your smile I can see just over yonder, framed by each mountain peak. As the wind dances round and the sun is warm, I'm so glad to be part of it all. Just help me remember when back in the city that heaven surrounds us all. So why can't I see it when treading that concrete or crossing an asphalt street? That persistent above me are billowing clouds, ready my gaze to meet. Floating along, they wave to me softly in silence high up above, just wanting me now and then to remember the greatest gift still is love. Your fingerprints are all around me as we play hide and seek. Your smile I can see just over yonder, framed by each mountain peak. As the wind dances round and the sun is warm, I'm so glad to be part of it all. Just help me remember when back in the city that heaven surrounds us all. I sit on a park bench and watch the sunset behind a mountain's top. In the noisy crush of too many people, it's hard to know where to stop. If all these distractions make me blind to everything else around, I could even forget that where I am is potentially holy ground. Your fingerprints are all around me as we play hide and seek. Your smile I can see just over yonder, framed by each mountain peak. As the wind dances round and the sun is warm, I'm so glad to be part of it all. Just help me remember when back in the city that heaven surrounds us all. Yes, heaven surrounds us all. Yes, heaven can live in us all. turning the pages of chronicles long, singing the verses of my own song, feeling the changes in the passing of time, writing the letters of the name that is mine. Meager resources as measured by man, seeds in the soil of God's almighty hand, embracing the mystery since time first began, of wisdom and love right here where we stand.